What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the After Action Report. My name is Joshua Howard, and today we're going to be talking about the Laughing Dragon experience, part of the big Laughing Dragon event that they had for, I think it was mostly card games. I know there was a big Magic the Gathering event happening like across the street, but this was their Warhammer 40k part of the event. It was hosted down in Tacoma, Washington, and it had like 70 people, so it was a pretty decent sized event coming out overall, especially for the area. Before I get too far into this event, I do want to, of course, give a big shout out to everybody who was involved. Laughing Dragon for having a bunch of fantastic TOs. They did a really good job setting up this space. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Also, Team Aegis, which is one of the teams in the Pacific Northwest who helps provide terrain, and Deep Straight Gang, another one of the teams that help provide terrain, and the banner that I oftentimes have been playing under up here in the PNW. Before I get into the actual event itself and my games at the event, I do want to say I don't feel like I was playing particularly well at this event, and I feel like there are a couple of contributing factors for this one. The first one, I had been intending to play Mechanized Assault at this event for the couple of weeks leading up to it. I put in about a dozen games in the week prior in order to try and help myself understand the detachment a little bit better, and I was just not being able to make it work. I've been talking to John Winter Russell quite a bit, who has been also really enjoying the detachment, and every single time I was just running into, I just think this has a bunch of losing matchups that I am likely going to have to play at the event, and I don't really want to do that. And so by the time I actually got to like the day of list submission, I had still been playing Mechanized Assault up until about like 3 or 4 hours before list submission, and I kind of went, okay, fine. I'm just going to submit the list that I took to Challengers Cup. I don't really want to think too hard about it. And because of that, I wasn't feeling super. I don't know, want to say I didn't feel confident in the list. The list was clearly good enough. I still did pretty good at the teams event at Challengers Cup. However, of course, there's a couple big differences there. One, I got to be choosing my boards and got to choose my matchups a lot better at Challengers Cup than you do in a singles environment, so the list wasn't quite as tailored for singles as I would have liked it to have been. I probably would have had a little bit more just like stuff, just more stuff to throw in the midboard and a little bit less Dorns in the list. The other big thing is I didn't necessarily do the prep because I wasn't feeling super like into my list. I wasn't doing the same kind of prep I normally do for a lot of events where I'll go and like really understand all of the like distances between different footprints. What do I need to do in order to get around this angle to make sure I can see them on this upcoming turn? How can I hide from different ways? And so I was mostly relying on a lot of just intuition and experience that I built up prior to this, rather than having a much more nuanced and very specific understanding of a lot of the boards and a lot of the missions that I was playing for this event. And so when I got into a couple of the games, I was realizing, these things that I'm using my experience and intuition for aren't quite working because the terrain isn't exactly what I was expecting, right? Like, oh, the location of the objective on tipping point versus on search and destroy is different, and it changes what you can do with the rest of your shooting and the rest of your transports. And then the last thing was I've been playing a lot of Rogue Trader over the past week, and I didn't necessarily get as much sleep as I was wanting to. I didn't necessarily have a great sleep schedule in the days leading up to the event, and honestly still kind of don't after the event has been over. So I don't feel like I set myself up for a lot of success with this one. And because of that, it led to a lot of my games kind of being on autopilot, where I was making decisions that were mostly good enough, and I'm in otherwise strong enough player that a lot of my decisions on autopilot meant that I could still play against most people relatively effectively. However, I was not able to do that during this event nearly as much as I wanted to, and I also hit a lot of strong players this event. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start talking about it. So let's go ahead and start talking about the list that I actually brought to this event. Despite what it says along the top, I was actually playing combined. If you kept going after the start of the Mechanized Assault, it was a combined arms list, and I know I had at least one or two opponents be a little bit confused when they saw that I was bringing the combined arms, because they saw Mechanized Assault, and then they skipped all the rest of the stuff until they actually saw what was in the army. So apologies for anyone for that. I will work on that and come up with something funnier in the future that is less confusing. But it was one Cadian command squad, Gaunt's Ghost, two Rogal Dorn commanders with stubbers, extra stubbers and multi-meltas, Ursula Creed, one 20-man of Cadian shock troops, one 20-man of Death Corps of Krieg, two Chimeras with heavy flamers, one Taurox, three Kasrkin, another Rogal Dorn battle tank, so the one with the blank, and then two individual scout sentinels, putting something in reroll ones. in general, when I actually built this list, it was mostly designed to just defend on layouts 6 and 2, primarily when looking at Challengers Cup, and it was not necessarily something that is like super singles focused. It's clearly still good enough for singles, but it's not necessarily really tailored for that. And that kind of hurt me in a couple of the games that we were actually playing. If I were to do this again, I would probably drop this third Rogal Dorn battle tank and just look to put more stuff in the midboard. Like maybe another Lehman Russ, maybe another couple units of Catachan, maybe another like Deathcore of Krieg Brick, just things in order to control the midboard a little bit better. I don't need quite as much damage in a singles environment as long as I'm controlling the midboard more effectively. And so this is one of those things where it was, if I had like built it for layout 6, I definitely or if I was doing it for like a singles environment where I can't reject my worst matchups, we probably drop this Rogal Dorn and just take, like I said, just take more stuff. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and start talking about our first game. My first game was playing up against Brian and his Montclaw Tau. He had 2 Cadre Fireblades, one with the, I believe this is the Give Guys Scout enhancement. He had the Commander and Enforcer Battlesuit, I believe with the extra OC enhancement, and then it's got a bunch of the missile pods, 2 units of breachers, 1 devilfish, 1 fire knives with missiles, 1 unit of crew carnivores, 2 units of pathfinders. One of them had the like infiltrate, and then one of them had the -2 to charge. There it is, the grav inhibitor drone, which I've started seeing people take, which I don't know how I feel about it yet, but I've started seeing people take it. 2 individual piranhas, 3 riptides, 2 Skyrays, and then 2 units of stealth battlesuits, and then everything on this list had the smart missile systems if it could be like equipped with them. So overall, this is one of the styles of list that I was really hoping to not really hit just kind of in general, just because it has a lot of pushing power. It actually has the tools with the 3 Riptides and the 2 Skyrays to actually do a lot of damage to my Dorns, and if you start losing Dorns, you very rapidly start losing your damage and your ability to play later on in the game if your opponent forces you to come out relatively early. And with the Breachers and the Pathfinders, he had the tools to control a lot of the board right off the bat. The game that we played was a little bit of a wonky one because it was on Supply Drop, Hammer and Anvil on GW Layout 7. And 7 is a board that you don't see very often. It basically is only played on Hammer and Anvil. And Supply Drop is also a bit of a weird mission because on Supply Drop, it's the one where objectives slowly disappear, and the last objective in the middle of the board is worth 15 points at the end of the game. The other big thing that makes Layout 7 a little bit weird is how powerful this line here is. If you take a look at how the sight lines work out, there's actually just this very small triangle like here where you can actually deploy things safely, and it's not even that safe because if your opponent counter deploys here and just moves past, they can still just shoot everything in this pocket pretty much all the time. So you end up having this like massive, like basically all of this is just dead deployment zone that you can't really use very effectively. This is ineffective, and so you end up having a ton of like your army just like in here, using this piece here, and there's some safety back here, but you're pushed really far back, and so it really incentivizes both players to go punch kind of like this in a yin-yang style. But the other big thing is because this is the U, and if you're not playing with WC charge rules, you can't, if you're just like an inch back here, you just basically can't charge this. So it makes it really, really difficult for both players when they're trying to go like this in order to hold that. So a really important part of this map is making sure that you have like things that are here that can like scout into relative safety relatively quickly. And if you can't do that, then you're just going to lose a lot of your army very fast. The other big thing is because there's not a wall right here, this staging point and this staging point are really tough to make work. You need to be relatively fast because you oftentimes have to like stage entirely behind these ruins, and as you can already see, even from like here to the center of the board, you're already looking at about 10 inches. So it becomes very, very difficult to mount effective aggression on this board in ways that it didn't used to be. Originally, these pieces used to be up against the board edge, which meant that there was a lot more safety like here and here in order to actually deploy things. Brian was a great guy, but he was also relatively new to Tau. I believe he was saying he was mostly a Space Marine player previously, but he had a gorgeous like Halo themed army. Like his crew were done up like, was it ODST or like not Marines? I don't know what they're called, but just part of the UNSC, and then his Riptides were also looking like members from Halo Reach. And he was doing a great job with all the painting as well. But one of the big things about this game was that Brian was kind of missing out on how to navigate the game, and he didn't necessarily understand that he was the one that needed to force interaction. I was able to get a unit of Krieg to just kind of hang out over here by starting them behind this wall and just getting a big advance and able to move them relatively safely. And I never really lost control of this objective. Whereas at the same time, I had like a Taurox here, a Chimera here, where I was able to just consistently send out guys in order to deny this objective from Brian. And I think the single biggest thing that happened in this game was Brian started off, he had a unit of Pathfinders just strung out along here. I had a Chimera, I think it was a Dorn, and then like a Scout Sentinel and like a Taurox, basically all hidden in here. And the biggest thing that I was expecting was I was expecting Brian to take this unit of Pathfinders, and even though they couldn't scout forward, they can still like move 6 or 7 or whatever and take a 2 or 3 inch charge into all of my stuff that was just right here. And the big reason why this was going to be a really big issue for me, if he had gone for it, was if he gets his Pathfinders something like this, wrapping the the Chimera and the Kasrkin inside are not going to be able to put enough OC onto this objective without rolling in advance. And the big advantage that gives him is the Pathfinders aren't going to kill anything, but if I am forced to use my Kasrkin to come onto this objective and roll in advance, that means they're not going to be shooting for the turn. And that means whatever he has hiding back on this wall afterwards is going to be alive. He's going to get a unit of Kasrkin, and the Kasrkin are going to do no damage. But he didn't do that. What the Pathfinders ended up doing is they basically just like strung out from like here. He didn't actually touch this objective, but his idea was that he just wanted to kind of block the movement, not necessarily realizing how easy it was for me to go around. And because of that, and he wasn't necessarily putting out a lot of pieces in order to force interaction. What he was allowing me to do, because he put like a Piranha here and like a Piranha here, was I was able to like have a Rogal Dorn that was hiding here just like shoot the Piranha in a position where I was not going to get shot back. And I had like another Rogal Dorn over here take the minimum line in order to shoot this one back. And this happened for a couple of turns where he would put something out, I would kill it. He wouldn't score primary because I would stand on his objectives better than he was standing on mine. And by the time I actually brought out my Rogal Dorns in order to go for a firefight, when he had Riptides and Skyrays actually starting to need to play the game because he was running out of trash, it was turn 4. And by the time we hit turn 4, he doesn't have lethal hits anymore. I still do. I still have my ability to take all of my Rogal Dorns and kill all of the different pieces on his board. And he had lost a ton of his output. I also still had this Krieg unit who was still intact towards the end of the game. I had staged Ursula Creed and many friends just in here, getting ready to just jump onto the objective at the end of the game for the 15 points. He just didn't have the volume necessary to actually deal with all of my OC that was still on the board. One of the big things about this game is, of course, because my opponent went first, he's really required to force interaction as quickly as possible. And he was playing a lot of the game as though he was going second, but without the ability to score the points at the end of the game. So one of the big things that I think was a contributor to that is I was talking to Brian during the game, and one of the things that you can do is if you have a Devilfish just parked in here, one of the things that I was talking to Brian about was trying to understand a lot of the places where you can use your breachers. And one of the things that we were looking at was this wall here was not necessarily quite as long. This wall here is 4 inches on the image, but in the game it was probably about 3 inches. It probably cut off like about here. And so looking for ways that you can stage a Devilfish somewhere in this area allows you to look for opportunities to take the breachers inside. They move 3, they move 6, or they disembark 3, they move 6, and then you auto-advantage 6, means that you can get up to 15 inches, which is, you know, somewhere in here, which will allow you to shoot at anything on this objective really aggressively. But that was not something that Brian was really looking for. And because of that, I was able to hold Brian to a 0 on his primary, whereas I got at least one objective on every turn. The game ended up being an 81 to 39 in my favor on round 1, and I'm hoping that some of the things that I said to Brian, because I gave him a little bit of advice on how to play layout 6, which is one of Tao's better matchups, and I hope some of the things that I told Brian after the game was over was really helpful for him as he starts to get more competitive with the game. So next, before I really get into the rest of the games, one of the things that I will say is there were a handful of players who were above 1700 elo at this event. They were Donald Plummer, who's mostly a Tau, but I've also played him on his Death Guard, Stephen Ross, who mostly plays Necrons as far as I understand, and Adrian James, who only plays Imperial Knights. There were other strong players as well who don't necessarily have as high of an elo at this event, but remember those 3 names, because in round 2, I ended up playing up against Stephen Ross and his Necron Starshatter arsenal. Now, one of the big things about this matchup is that Starshatter doesn't have a lot of things on the board, but they are really annoying to remove. And Stephen was playing Catacomb Command Barge with the Dread Majesty, 1 Hexmark Destroyer, Illuminar Ceres, who's just really, really obnoxious to kill because he has that 4-up Feel No Pain, 1 Technomancer, the Silent King, 1 Reanimator, 1 unit of Canoptic Scarabs, and it's worth noting, because you can go back and watch this game on War Games Live, Steven forgot he had these. They never made it onto the board, and he didn't play it against me, and he didn't play it in his round 1. He didn't realize that he had them in his box until round 3. So my opponent was missing 40 points of his army. It's hard to know exactly how much of an impact it made on the game, but having that extra just little unit to screen things out would have been pretty nice. He had 1 unit of the Canoptic Tomb Crawlers, which is basically a slightly cheaper Crypto Thralls in a lot of ways. 1 big unit of Wraiths, 1 unit of 5 Death Marks, 3 Doomsday Arcs, and 1 unit of Flayed Ones. So as you kind of look at it, one of the big things that you take a look at with most Necron armies is, each thing is fairly hard to remove, but Doomsday Arcs are just really inconsistently damaging, right? Because it's d6 plus 1 attacks, and they're also really inconsistent for how durable they are, because they have 4-up invulns. And this will play a big part in the rest of the talk about this game. If you're interested in actually seeing the entire game, this one was available on War Games Live, so I'll try and put a link to that in the description as well if you want to go watch it. But the game that we played on, it was Scorched Earth on Tipping Point, and this is Games Workshop Layout 6. And gamers, I just want to say that this game was absolutely wild in terms of how the dice really swung things around. So I was lucky enough to go second in this game, and one of the things that happened was Steven drew a tempting target on top of 1. And of course, I naturally say, please come touch this objective over here. I want you to put something out in the open so that I can kill it. And Steven obliged. He put like a Wraith, and then like one of the Crypto Thrally things, and the rest of them were behind here. Maybe there's 1 more out in the open in order to make this happen. And this is where the game started to get a little bit funky with how the game actually progressed. There's a lot of funny interacting rules that Steven did tell me about, where he can do a res at the end of the fight phase as a stratagem. He also has like a res that he can do with, I think it's the Catacomb Command Barge. There's also a reactive move that he has after I shoot something, and so it can get very weird very quickly. And I end up drawing Area Denial on the bottom of 1, and I end up putting a Scout Sentinel, something like this, in order to stand the objective. Now, a couple of things to note. Because this situation becomes really complicated, what I was hoping for was my Scout Sentinel that was like here or whatever. When I rolled in advance in order to look at the Wraiths, what I really wanted to happen was I wanted the Scout Sentinel to end up like covering most of the objectives so that Steve could not deny it. I was expecting to get a 2 on Area Denial from this situation. And in order to make it happen, what I needed to do was I had like 1 Dorn like parked like this, and another Dorn parked behind it, with the idea that this Dorn could see like this, like these 2 pieces or something like that. Whereas this Dorn here was able to see all of this, and so it could even see this last guy. And my expectation, having shot at Wraiths many a time with a Dorn, is it's very swingy, but on average, most of the time, you're going to kill 2, maybe 3 Wraiths with your Dorn. you just have a lot of damage 3 shots, and with the 5-up Feel No Pain, they're functionally damage 2, so it takes about 2 shots to kill a Wraith, on average. You're going to double that because they have a 4-up Invul, but the math gets really weird. It can be very swingy. When I played up against Jason Flanzer at Challengers Cup, I just wiped a unit of Wraiths for free. However, this time, when I was shooting at Steve's Wraiths, I could not roll to wound at all. And I ended up only killing a single Wraith. I only get a single one of them. And with my Scout Sentinel here, and after that, Steve decides he's going to see if he can roll a good enough reactive move in order to get his unit out of the way. And I don't know what he needed. I'm going to guess he needed at least a 4 in order to get the Wraith that was standing like here, in order to not be in line of sight anymore. So on a 1 through 3, he's still going to get shot anyway. On a 4+, he's going to probably get them in a spot where they can't be seen anymore. And Steve rolls a 5. And what that means is the Wraiths that were over here are now like over here, and then he's able to res guys onto the point afterwards because I didn't roll a large enough advance. And so, firstly, I'm really sad. One, I only killed one Wraith. It is now back. I can't shoot at it anymore. And my area denial, he was able to get within 3 inches of the center of the board in order to make sure that my area denial didn't go off. And worse than that, he also was able to get enough OC onto the objective in order to take it. So what ended up happening is I was expecting to score 2 points on area denial because I was expecting something to be within 6. But I was not expecting to lose this objective because I thought he was only ever going to be able to get 3 OC onto the objective. I will spend my CP or Creed's free strat on Inspired Command in order to tie him on the objective. So I was expecting to get 2, and I was not expecting him to score this objective because at the same time, I had also put, I think it was like a Scout Sentinel or something on this objective over here so that he was not going to score this one. But it ended up being an 8-point swing on the fact that I only killed one Wraith, and then Steve also rolled a high enough number that he was able to completely deny the area denial and also score the middle objective. Now, I wasn't out of the game from this position, but I was not feeling happy about what was going on. My expectation with Steve and all of his Wraiths, something like this, I had like Dorn, and like I think my last Dorn was like here. Something like this, but this Dorn didn't peek out. I was expecting that these Wraiths were just going to come, rush in, and just tag everything. And he would let me score this objective over here, but he was going to very safely control this one here, and he was going to use the fact that these Dorns could no longer shoot into the middle to have something like Illuminor Ceres just stand in this objective and burn it. Because it was going to take too much of my army just dealing with these Wraiths that were suddenly in my side of the board. He would get the time to burn the middle objective and then deny a lot of my ability to have the going second advantage. Instead, Steve chose to take a staging turn here and basically thought that he was going to be in a pretty decent position from the rest of the game. And then things get absolutely crazy wild. So I had peeked one Dorn up over here in order to shoot at a DDA that was posted somewhere in here. I did basically no damage to it. I had another Dorn, I believe, come out to, I think, around here in order to have 2 Dorns once again be ready to shoot at Wraiths that were here in the middle of the board. And because I just like whiffed so much of my damage, I was like, I think I'm about to die because the DDAs are now remaining stationary. They're going to get the dev wounds, they're going to get the heavy, and they're going to start blasting me. Yeah, DDA here, one of them came up over this way, I believe, and there's one of them hanging out here just in the long... Maybe it was here. Maybe the other Doomsday Arc was here. But the last one was definitely down here, just hanging out over the edge of the ruin. And they were going to go shooting down this way in order to try and take out 2 Dorns. Steve whiffed almost completely. For all of his shot counts, he rolled a 1, and then a 1, and then I think it was a 2. So I think he had a total of like 7 shots of DDA shots over his entire go turn on this spot. He did like 4 damage to one of the Dorns, and that was super brutal. The other thing was he brought the Silent King out, and he put like 1 men here. I think the Silent King was here, and like the other men here. And I asked him, you are within 18 inches here for my multi-meltas. Do you want to be within 18 inches and give me the chance to overwatch you with the multi-meltas? He goes, absolutely, don't worry about it. And gamers, this is where the game really got off the rails. Because I go ahead, I roll my multi-meltas, I get 2 lethal hits. He fails both saves. Now remember, at this point, the Silent King has -1 damage, and the Menhirs each have 5 wounds available to them. I go ahead and roll my first Melta shot. It does 6. Down to 5, kills 1 Menhir. Then the next one, I roll a 5 on damage, leaves the next Menhir on 1. Okay? I roll my Stubbers. I get 5 out of 18 lethal hits. He fails the save on the Menhir. And then I start shooting all of my damage through. I shoot the Pulverizer, I shoot the Oppressor, and I think I do like a bonus like 6 damage to the actual Silent King from there. And so the damage that I did to the Silent King in Overwatch was more than I did to a lot of the rest of his army just during my normal turns. And when Steve comes out and does like no damage to any of my Dorns on his go turn, it's my turn, and my go turn doesn't whiff. On my next turn, I'm able to kill like DDA here, kill the Silent King, kill the last of the Rays by charging them with Death Core of Krieg. And Steve is very quickly left with like 1 Doomsday Arc. He might have had like another one over here, but I have this mass of just bodies in here by the time we get to his turn 4, and on my turn 4, they end up taking away his home objective. And honestly, this game was a ton of fun. Steve was a great opponent to play up against. Now, one of the big things I've had a couple ask me about is when there was the Wraiths over here, and he had like the Crypto Thrall thing, and I lined up 2 tanks over here to shoot at them. I've had a lot of people ask me whether or not shooting them was good. And I've had some people say, why did you only shoot 1 Dorn at them? Well, I didn't want to shoot only 1 Dorn at them. I was trying to shoot them with 2 Dorns. And I talked to Steve a little bit after about it as well, and he was saying, yeah, I did want you to shoot at them, but the expectation was you're probably, same thing, kill 2 or 3, and then he had a similar expectation. Kill 2 or 3, spend a CP, take this guy, hide behind, do a little bit of shifting over here, but because he is probably going to lose too much, he was going to put me to 2 points on the area denial, but even he was not expecting to get the primary swing that he did. My bigger worry, and why I think I have to shoot them, and I've talked to a couple other players about this since, is if these Rays here are left unattended, and they just get to run over here and just start getting into a brawl with my Death Core of Krieg, because they're doing it on the objective, and I'm not going to do basically any damage to them back, this big Wraith break is actually a fairly high amount of OC, because you have 6 times 2, and then they each get +1 because you had the Cadian Command Barge. So this is 18 from dudes. You have the 2 Crypto Thrall guys who are each 2, so this is another 6. And then you have the Technomancer who is just 1 guy times 2, so this is 2. So this is 26 OC, and that means that I need at least 9 guys alive. And when they charge the Death Core of Krieg, because my Death Core of Krieg are on the objective, he has that +1 to hit, and it becomes sketchy, right? I really didn't want to just let these Wraiths come over here, touch there, and potentially get a swing charge over here. That is worse, in my mind, than not trying to shoot them. So I do think I made a pretty reasonable decision overall. I just think it went very badly. And then I got really rewarded when I got a couple of really big shooting activations in the following turns, whereas Steve basically didn't have his dice turn on until it was way too late. Overall, though, the game ended 87-61 in my favor, largely because I was going second, and I never lost control of this objective up here. Because after that, when the Rays went over it this way instead, they were not really able to ever mount a successful offense on my natural. So I ended up getting a lot of points that way. Whereas I was able to get Steve off of this objective every single time. And I had enough dudes left over to still just have enough OC, have enough control over the board in general, that I was able to take it. Like I said, though, if you're interested in seeing more about this game, it was on Wargames Live. Shout out to Joe for having me and Steve on this one. For my next game, remember there were 3 names I said at the beginning. It was Stephen Ross, Donald Plummer, and Adrian James. For round 3, I ended up hitting Donald Plummer. And Donald, firstly, has gorgeous armies. He put so much work into them. They look fantastic. And this time, he was back on Tau. Now, I was expecting he was going to bring Montclaw to this event because that's what he brought to Challengers Cup. But he was playing Auxiliary Cadre. And Ox Cadre, he was bringing one commander in Cold Star Battlesuit, two Ethereals, meaning that you get to roll twice for the Ethereal CP, one unit of Fire Knives with Missile Pods, one Ghost Keel, one Crew Carnivores, two units of 6 Krutux Rampagers, one unit of 2 Krutux Riders, one Pathfinder team with the, I think it was the Infiltrate Drone. Yeah, the Infiltrate Drone, 2 Riptides, 2 Sky Rays, 2 Stealth Suits, 2 Vespid. The thing about Ox Cadre is that it has a lot of useful tools for bringing things that are Krut and having a mix of Tau and Ox, and having a mix of Tau and Auxiliary units. And a couple of the big ones that you have is Auto 6 Advance for Auxiliary, and Advance and Charge for Auxiliary. And so these Krutux Rampagers, who only move 7, can auto advance 13 and then go for a charge, which is not super scary a lot of the time. But when you add in the fact that they go Scout 7 and they go 20 inches and then charge on turn 1, becomes a really big deal. It becomes an even bigger deal when we talk about what we were actually playing on, because we were playing on Layout 6, Search and Destroy, Take, and Hold. And there's a lot of freedom that comes with the fact that you Scout 7. One of the units of Krutux Rampagers was posted up right about here, and they could scout backwards this way where I would not be able to shoot them, partly because they become Lone Op 18 where they're wholly within 6 of another Tau unit, but also if he goes first, he gets to Scout 7 this way. And I make my biggest mistake, I think, in this game during the deployment step, because I really did not want to give Donald Gaunt's Ghost just to prevent this scout move. And that was wrong. What I really needed to do, because Donald put like a unit of Pathfinders, something like this, with the idea that he could also scout back into here if I went first, is I still needed to use Gaunt's Ghost to just be somewhere in here to block off this scout so that these Rampagers could not come this direction. And this game kind of ended on top of 1. And this game kind of ended on top of 1 because I did not choose to block the scout. So what ends up happening, one of the normal things that you go for is you have this 20-man unit of Krieg, and you set them up such that they can 9-inch move onto this objective over here. And typically, you're going to try and roll in advance. What you generally want to do is you want to get like a couple of guys maybe here, or maybe even like tow a guy onto this objective, but have the rest of them back behind over here. And kind of let the advance decide what happens and what happens in the matchup. Like against shooting armies, you want to be further back. You want to have like a guy towing on, or like a couple of guys towing on. Whereas over on the other side, whereas sometimes you can stand here if you are okay getting in long range shootouts down this corridor. But I also had a Chimera here and a Taurox like here. And one of the other really big things about Layout 6 is that this shooting lane is really, really punishing. On Search and Destroy, if you are not willing to just deploy things in the open down like in this section, you have a lot of dead deployment space. Right? You can't really stand in this ruin. You can't really stand here. You can't really stand here. There's also shooting lane like here. So just like we were talking about with round 1, there's a lot of space that you can't really use on this board. And because Donald went first, and I didn't really have good places to put them, my goal was that this Chimera is going to scout up and be kind of hidden. So what ended up happening is these Krutux Rampagers scouted 7. I don't remember if he had to auto-advance, but, you know, he maybe rolled a big advance, and then was able to charge into this unit here, and I think a Scout Sentinel that was here or something like that. And the other thing that happened was he put a Sky Ray like here in order to pick off the Chimera that wasn't able to scout far enough to be outside of line of sight. So he was able to pick off like a Taurox and the Chimera, most of the guys that popped out, and like half of this Death Korps of Krieg unit. So I lost a lot of my ability to play my own natural really early on. And the bigger issue with all of this is when it became my turn and there's just this mass of dudes just sitting right here, my unit is going to be crippled. The Krieg unit is going to be way lower strength than it needs to be in order to go touch this. I'm going to have to take a bunch of desperate escapes. I've already lost a bunch of models to the melee. And it's going to be really, really hard for me to hold this objective here. Whereas on the other side of the board, it's really difficult for me to deal with the ghost keel that Donald had set up right around here. And this is kind of one of those things where I was talking about how understanding the difference between like tipping point and search and destroy becomes a really big deal. Because one of the things to know about this other side of the board is this objective, it's the center is 14 inches from this side, which means that it is 16 inches from the center of this objective to the middle of the board. And this is another 4. So this is 16 plus 4. We'll call it like -3 for the, it's like 3.5 or something for the actual objective. But that means the distance between this wall and this objective is about 16.5 inches. You will note that that is more than a Taurox even with move, move, move. And a Chimera, if it could go through the wall, would still have to roll in advance. But it can't, so the Chimera has to come around like over this way in order to even get there. And oftentimes when my opponent has something on this objective, like standing here or standing here, I can normally shoot it off, right? If like the Kasrkin just like hop out over the wall, or I bring out the Chimera over this way in order to shoot, and the Chimera is relatively safe because it's like hiding outside of this line of sight, I could normally deal with that. Unfortunately, the Ghost Keel is something that it's too far away for me to charge. I can't kill it with Kasrkin, because even if I hit and win with the Meltas, he can just blank them, so they're going to do no damage. And I don't really have the tools to really take Donald off of this objective over on his side of the board. So because Donald put so much pressure with his early game Taurox Rampagers over here, and I didn't have the tools to go play up against his natural, I ended up getting beaten on both primary and secondary because I had lost a bunch of units going first, and I lost my ability to play my natural really early on. We ended up playing about 4 rounds before I threw in the towel. Like, I was really looking, this was probably the game that I think, after not deploying Gaunt goes here and making that deployment mistake, I think I played the rest of this game. I think this was one of the better games that I played for about 2 rounds, because I was really locked in trying to find weird angles I could take in order to try and find a way back in. And I think the last thing I did was I told Donald, look, if I need to make some charges, and if I make these charges and take you off of primary, we can play it out from there. But if I don't make those charges, But if I don't make those charges, you get another 10 and I get another 5. I think we're both good enough to know that I'm beat. Overall, though, this game ended up being a 66-90 in Donald's favor. We ended up talking a fair bit about it afterwards, and we were both saying, I think that this was kind of the perfect storm. Because one, the fact that there were these shooting lanes here that Donald could use going first, whereas it was really tough for me because he had a lot of lone operative, whereas really tough for me to swing back with the lone operative on all of his auxiliary units. Also, the fact that it was search and destroy, so his rampagers were actually like close enough to be threats relatively early on in the game. And Donald going first ended up being a lot of things that ended up going in his favor that made it good for him. Whereas on most other missions, it was going to be a lot tougher for Donald to actually play in the guard matchup. And this kind of goes towards one of those things where a lot of people say in order to win a GT, you do have to get lucky. Because even though Donald didn't end up going on to win this event, if we played this on Tipping Point or we played this on Crucible of Battle, it was going to be a lot more difficult for him because his Taurox Rampagers are going to be so far back that they weren't going to be real charge threats except against things that were already in the middle of the board. But this is also a game that ended up being on stream. It wasn't on the main Wargames live stream, but it was on the Patreon table. So if you are interested in supporting Joe and Wargames Live, go ahead and take a look at that one there. For round 4, I ended up playing up against David and his AdMech Halo Screed. He had Belisarius Call, a Tech Priest Manipulus. I don't know what this enhancement does. 1, 2, 3 Nissus Qatari Rangers, 1 Scorpius Dune Rider, which is the transport, 1 unit of 3 Las Chickens, 1 unit of 6 Cataphrone Destroyers, all with the plasmas, 1, 2, 3 5-mans of the Bats with the Move, Shoot, Move, 1, 2 units of 5 Scarian Infiltrators, and 1 unit of 10 Ruststalkers, 2 units of 5 Ruststalkers, and then 2 Disintegrators. One of them having I think this one is the Las Cannon equivalent, and this one has some indirect, which he brought specifically for the Eldar matchup. We ended up playing this one on Purge the Foe on Crucible of Battle. Now, unfortunately, this game ended in a weird way. I'm going to tell you first about the funny story that happened during this game, and then we'll go ahead and talk about what ended up actually happening in this game. So, this game was Purge the Foe, right? And on Purge the Foe, whoever goes second has a pretty big advantage. The fact that I went second in this game was a pretty big deal. But one of the things that happened was in the bottom of one, I drew Overwhelming Force, and David had a unit of, I don't know if it's Rustalkers or Infiltrators, whatever, and he decided to arrange them where he had 1, 2, 3 guys over here, and 2 guys on this side of the wall. Okay? Now, what I did is I took a Taurox, which I think I'd scouted to like here, and it went over here and came here. And I asked him at this point, would you like to reactive move? David said no. I took my unit of Kasrkin and set them up all over here with the idea that I know killing these with their stealth and their 5-up invul becomes really weird, but I was going to throw a grenade and set my Meltamine up such that I could Meltamine this guy if I really needed to at the end of the shooting phase, or at the start of the charge phase. I go to throw the grenade, and I tell David, as long as I don't roll a perfect 6 grenade and kill, like, even if I roll like a 5 and kill 2 and leave this guy on 1, great. My entire Kasrkin unit is going to activate, and I should be able to kill 2.5 Rustalkers. But if I roll a perfect 6 grenade and kill this last guy, I can no longer see these guys. Now, the big thing about this is because I didn't kill them, 1, I didn't get my 4 points of Purge the Foe because I didn't end up killing a unit on turn 1, and 2, I lost 3 points of Overwhelming Force on turn 1 because they were on an objective. So it was effectively 7 points that I missed out on. Now let's go ahead and talk about what happened in the game that became an issue. So I don't remember what exactly it was that I shot at. I think it was like a transport or something, but I brought out a Rogal Dorn over here down this shooting line in order to shoot at something. I think it was a transport. It doesn't really matter. On his turn, David takes the unit of Cataphren destroyers that are back over here. He advances them and shoots back at my Rogal Dorn. The Rogal Dorn ends up living because he had put the Oath of Moment on the Death Korps of Krieg in order to charge them with like Rustalkers or Infiltrators or something. But this Dorn takes 8, so it is down to 10 wounds. Okay? So the Cataphren destroyers here, and my Dorn somewhere over here. And this is one of those issues where I kind of say I was a little bit on autopilot, is this Dorn decides to move in exactly within 24 inches so that I can shoot the Pulverizer Cannon. And what I had forgotten at the time was 24 inches. If I'm outside of 24, I can't get overwatched. So I shouldn't have given him the Overwatch ability at all, but he takes the Cataphrons, he Overwatches, and kills the Dorn exactly. I even spend a CP to reroll a 5-up save, and I don't get it. So I go, oh no, my Dorn that was suddenly here and was going to pick up, like, bats and do some damage to, like, dudes in a transport or whatever, I now have to play without a Dorn. That probably swings the game. So I go ahead, I play the rest of my turn out, I do a bunch of shooting, I kill like a couple of chickens over here, and then I say, alright, let me roll my hazardous for these Kasrkin. And that's when David goes, oh crap, I forgot to roll my hazardous for my Cataphrons when I shot them at the Dorn the first time, and I also forgot to do it for the Overwatch. Let me go ahead, this first batch of hazardous rolls is for the first time that they shot. Now, David had the Tech Priest also have a 10-point enhancement called Sanctified Ordnance, which allows you to re-roll failed hazardous tests, and also add 6 inches to the range. So realistically, he's looking at a spot where every single time he shoots a hazardous weapon, it's only going to be 1 in 36 where you ever take any of that damage. The problem was, David goes, he takes the 6 hazardous rolls, fails 2 of them. Then he re-rolls them and still fails 1 of them. Meaning that the first time, after he shot at the Rogal Dorn the first time and he did 8 damage to it, 1 of the Cataphrons was dead. So that when we get to the Overwatch, where my Dorn dies exactly, he was supposed to have 1 fewer destroyer coming in and actually making those attacks. And when you're hitting on 5s with lethal 6s in the Overwatch, losing a guy changes the math really wildly, especially since it was such a high roll. So we call over a judge at this point and ask the judge, what do you want to do in this situation? And we tell him, it's been a while since the rules mistake was made. And he goes, well, our standard penalty is a 20-point deduction. And when I heard that, kind of like in my game up against Matt Zealous at Challengers Cup, I go, ooh, that seems really harsh. Because David's been upfront about it. We haven't had any issues with the game other than this. And a 20-point deduction in a game that is going to be really close, like even with the Dorn having died, is probably an effective game loss. And even right now, as I'm thinking about it, I don't really know what the right answer for this is. So there are a couple different things I'm thinking about in this spot for what is supposed to happen. Because on the one hand, I don't want to win games like that. On the other hand, we can't really just re-roll it because I've made too many decisions based on the fact that the Dorn was dead, right? I moved a lot of my army in a different way. I made a lot of shooting attacks in different orders than I would have than if I had the Dorn there ready to shoot. We can't really go back in a way that is both accurate and fair. And fortunately, this rules mistake by my opponent has had a really big impact on the game in a really unexpected way. So I took a couple of minutes, I walked off, discussed it with another player, and eventually I decided that in a no-win situation, I was going to go with the judge's ruling. And so in this situation, I could either accept the 20-point penalty, effectively game loss my opponent for forgetting to roll hazardous, or I could decline the penalty and probably lose the game in a way that both me and my opponent were not going to feel good about. Even now, as I'm thinking about it, I'm mostly just sad about the situation because the game up to that point had been a lot of fun. I was definitely very stressed about the fact that my Dorn had died in a spot that I did not expect it to. And we didn't really get to finish the game because I expressed to David immediately afterwards, I don't think I'm going to have fun finishing this game out from this position. And so we just kind of called it after that. It did give us a lot of time to like talk about things he could have done differently, things I could have done differently in the game. But I'm not going to share the scoreboard because it doesn't really matter, but I am really curious what everybody else's thoughts are in this situation. Because just like I'm playing in Rogue Trader and there's like a bunch of situations where it's like, well, everything sucks. Like none of these options are good. Which option would you have taken in this situation? Also, David, I know you watch these videos, so hello, you were a great opponent. Thank you for playing the game, and thank you for being so upfront and gracious about what happened during the actual game. And hopefully the next game we play will be just as good and without those kind of rules mistakes. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about my game up against Torin that I played. And Torin is one of my teammates. He's playing Cult of Speed Orks, and that's what he's planning to play at the upcoming Teams event. And Cult of Speed is wild if you've never played up against it because just about everything that's like on a bike or is like a vehicle has fallback shoot and charge and advanced shoot and charge. And Torin is bringing Snickrot, Gaz, a Death Killer War Trike with an enhancement. I don't remember what the enhancement does. A mech, 1 unit of 20 boys, 2 units of 11 Gretchen, 1 unit of Storm Boys, 3 units of War Bikers, 2 Boom Deck of Snaz Wagons, a Daka Jet, 3 units of 6 Defcopters, 2 custom Booster Blasters, and 2 Shock Jump Dragsters. Now, if you don't know what all these things are, I don't blame you. I don't really know what all of them do either, but they go fast. 2 of them teleport around. And the Defcopters are very fast because they move 12 plus advance and charge. They have decent volume of shooting, but it's really swingy because they're all D3 number of shots, and they're hitting on 5s. And then you got the Daka Jet, which the Daka Jet has a rule where every successful hit is a critical hit. And it has sustain built in, and you can give it sustain too if it's close to things because you bonk it with the mech and you make it hit on 4s. Torin and I played this one on Layout 1, Linchpin, Search and Destroy. And remember how we've talked a lot about dead zones in deployments? Well, this is another one of those where this is basically undeployable. This is more or less undeployable. And so Torin has to set up basically his entire army like back here in the castle. Because of that, he gets very bogged down very quickly. He's got a couple of like guys that can teleport around so they can, up down like Gaunt's ghosts. But they do it in the movement phase instead of going up at the fight phase. And I'm not going to lie to you gamers, by the time I got into round 5, where I've already played 4 rounds of 40k over the past 2 days, my game against Donald, where I kind of checked out around turn 3 because I had made a deployment mistake that had cost me the game. My game against David, where I was kind of in a weird headspace because of the basically just getting gifted a forfeit, I I was kind of phoning it in by the time I got here. One of the big things about this matchup that actually made it a lot better for me is the fact that all of the Def Coptas and all of the like buggy things are vehicles. So I got lethal hits into these like T8 or 9, 3 up save, or like maybe 4 up save, 9 wounds, which means that like 4 multi melta shots are pretty likely to actually just kill it. And probably the most interesting thing that happens this game is Tauren takes his big ol' Gaz unit that's here. They advance their way into this pocket on turn 1, and then I end up putting a Scout Sentinel kind of in their way. And when he calls the Wah, he ends up rolling a 1 on this unit's advance, and that means that he doesn't have any real chargers that can go into anything other than the Scout Sentinel. So they beat the crap out of the Scout Sentinel. But one of the things that I'm trying to get better at doing is using the big Cadian brick, so Ursula, Creed, and friends, just kind of do things more proactively early in the game. And in this one, when there's when there's a big ol' honking group of boys out here, I take my unit of Cadians that are like all of their good guns are like here. I've got like a mass of guys here, and then kind of like 2 strings of guys kind of out like this, in order to block out the ability to come back in reinforcements. I take these guys and hop them right outside here, and use them, Dorn, and then like Dorn to have these guys go ahead and shoot first, kill off a bunch of the boys, and then I can use these Dorns to like pick up the stragglers immediately afterwards. But because I'm using all of the las guns and all of the like not overcharged plasma because I didn't need to just take down a bunch of orc boys was something that I think becomes a lot more important because there's not a lot of volume left in my opponent's army after I take down Gaz and the boys. The Def Coptas have a lot of shots, yes, and they're going to be with blast, but they're still hitting on 5s, so they're not necessarily going to be the same kind of volume or consistent volume necessary to actually take this down. Otherwise, with all the Def Coptas coming in, like a bunch of them came in over here, and another group like came in over here with Deep Strike. I think one of the big things for me about realizing like, oh, this isn't that bad, is when they dropped down, shot, and did like 3 damage to a Dorn. Maybe it was 6, but either way, like he shot so many shots and didn't actually kill the things that he was trying to kill multiple times. Whereas I had the volume to shoot him back. I could overwatch the Def Copters, I could overwatch the buggies, and just kill them fairly consistently. And while Tauren did a really good job at like keeping me to low primary early on in the game, keeping me to a 3, as he was running out of stuff, and I hit a 9-inch charge with a Death Core of Krieg unit that came in over here in order to try and charge into Snickrot and take him off of his objectives. His primary didn't necessarily have the volume necessary, and he didn't have like pieces that he could afford to just go and push buttons in different places. He actually scored almost all of the cards that he drew. Unfortunately, they were just lower scoring cards than I was drawing. The other big thing, I ended up winning this one 80 to 66. We talked it out after, I think it was round 5, maybe also round 4, because we were starting to run low on time, and I think we could both kind of see the writing on the wall that he was just running out of stuff relatively quickly. But Tauren was a great opponent. He also has some of the coolest models I've seen. One of the photo that we have on the thumbnail was Tauren's model, so you'll get to see like a little bit of all the cool stuff he has. And if we have more opportunities at the next Teams event, I'll go ahead and show you guys all the cool stuff that he's made. For my last game of the event, remember how I said there were 3 names? Stephen Ross, Donald Plummer, and Adrian James? I hit Adrian James as my last opponent going into round 6. And there was something that happened in this game that made me realize how much I was just kind of phoning it in and just playing on autopilot. And that's something that you really can't afford to do going up against Imperial Knights who can draw lines of sight that you don't necessarily think about super hard, especially if you haven't played up against Knights in a while. And in Adrian's army, he was playing Questora's Companions, the ones where you pick new deeds as you complete the other ones. He had 1 Atropos, 1 Lancer, 1 Castellan with the, this is the one with the Volcano Lance and the crazy plasma gun, 1 Crusader with the Battle Cannon and the Gatling Cannon, 1 Helverin, 1 Warglaive, and then 1 Calidus. And this is the one game. So I went second in every single game this event except for round 6. And I went first in round 6, and this was not good for me because I was playing on tipping point, take and hold. Now, as the game starts, I end up putting a lot of my army just kind of in here. One of the things that we measured is because, and you have to check this on every board every single time, is because the Dorn is a little bit more than 5 inches wide with the sponsons. You have to check every single time, is this terrain piece up against the edge of the footprint? Because if it is and it's tall enough, the Dorn doesn't actually fit through here. But sometimes, right, like if the wall is just straight up and down, you can't fit. But sometimes the wall is not just straight up and down. Sometimes the wall has like a foot here, and then the wall is back, and it'll have like another thing here where the sponson can fit, and then the Dorn can actually fit through. This time, we were playing with a footprint that was right up against the wall, and so the Dorn was not able to fit, meaning that I could not put a Dorn over here, or it was just going to get stuck like right in here. Because of that, I had one Dorn deployed here, second Dorn deployed here, and then third Dorn deployed here. And the mistake that I made was forgetting that Adrian can just tow in over here. And then just see over this way, because on turn 2 or 3, I had a Dorn like here, and second Dorn was hiding here. And I was expecting that this Dorn was going to get shot by an Atropos down this way. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I know the math on this. I am very unlikely to die. But when you had the other one, the one with the Volcano Lance up here, also pulling line of sight, I didn't even realize that was possible. And that's how I knew, oh, yep, I made a mistake. I end up losing the Dorn as both the Atropos and the Volcano Lance go into it. And at this point, I had already been like bleeding. And at this point, I was also bleeding pieces really quickly because I drew secure no man's land. So like I secured here and here. So I lost the Scout Sentinel. I put Kasrkin here on this objective. They end up dying. I had to put another Scout Sentinel here for area denial. Ended up dying. And Adrian's standing far enough back that I wasn't really able to shoot at him at all. I wasn't really able to do any damage to Adrian before he decided he's just going to put his entire army out in the middle at me. And when I'm losing so many like these little extra pieces because I need to drive up a score advantage before turn 5 where Adrian can just like stand on things, he doesn't need to play the game basically at all. He just needs to take these really he doesn't need to really play the game until he's ready to just like shove on me all at the same time. And if I get to like pick off one eye at a time, I'm probably going to win. I have the lethal hits. I'm going to win a shootout if he doesn't show his entire army all at the same time. And when I lost this Dorn and started playing the game with just 2 Dorns, I did not have the firepower to kill Adrian's Knights back. And even though I tried once again to go for like some long charges where I had like some Kasrkin and like Gaunt's Ghost or something over here, trying to charge into the Calidus in order to like swing charge onto this and try and hold Adrian to another 5, and also potentially give myself a 10. Like if I had made that charge and it had been a 10-point swing, and we would have been only a couple points apart. But because I failed all the charges that I needed to, I failed a couple extra battle shocks, that I was not able to out-OC Adrian on a couple crucial objectives. I called it right after missing this charge because I think that was the last time I had an opportunity to potentially get a win in the game. So basically, as I lost my armies slowly but surely, Adrian just had most of his knights still active the entire game, and he ended up getting 15s on both turns 4 and 5, getting him a big primary advantage. And he ended up winning this game 82-69. With that, at the end, I ended up going 4-2 at this event, and I kind of want to, and a little bit of reflection, because I feel like I haven't talked about as much of the things that happened in these games as I oftentimes do. Part of this is because I don't remember them as well as I could have. It's partly been a little bit longer It's partly been a little bit longer between playing them and recording this than it oftentimes is. But the other thing is, because I was on autopilot for so much of it, there's a lot of things about the games that I just wasn't thinking about in the moment, so I don't remember what was going on in a lot of them. I was not, like I said, I was not terribly happy with the way I played this event overall, but looking back on it, I've talked to a couple of other people about it, and even with me not happy about my performance, I still went 4 and 2, and I only lost to people who are 1700 elo or better, which means I only lost to people who are in the top 1 or 2% of players. So, am I happy about it? No, but I don't think I set myself up for success, and I think I hit a pretty reasonable expectation for myself. It also reminded me that if I want to get good results at events, I need to put in the effort to do so. I can't just like, I'll just play this list again. It's fine. I'll just do this thing. I need to actually put in the effort to make sure that I'm going to be getting the results that I want. So with all that said, thank you guys once again for tuning into the Laughing Dragon experience, the GT that we played in Tacoma. World is going on over the next couple of days. I'm going to be trying to do co-stream. World is going on over the next couple of days. I'm going to be doing co-stream for that if I'm allowed to do so. We'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.